Afghanistan's presidential palace is now in the hands of the Taliban. The group took control of the building after entering the capital city, Kabul, earlier Sunday. The New York Times is reporting that the Afghan government has officially collapsed, and President Ashraf Ghani has left the country. Even if that hasn't happened already, it seems inevitable with the lightning-fast advance of the Taliban. There have also been reports of gunfire at Karzai International Airport in Kabul. The U.S. Embassy moved its operations there over the weekend. Officials have instructed Americans to shelter in place. Secretary of State Tony Blinken tried to shift the blame Sunday morning to earlier administrations and the Afghan military.
Two things, Chuck. First, we've known all along that the Taliban was at its strongest position in terms of its strength since 2001. When we came to office, that was the fact. And we said all along, including back then, that there was a real chance that the Taliban would make significant gains throughout Afghanistan. But on the other hand, I have to tell you that the inability of Afghan security forces to defend their country has played a very powerful role in what we've seen over the last few weeks. The fact is, we invested, the international community invested over 20 years, billions of dollars in these forces, 300,000 of them, with an air force, something the Taliban didn't have, with the most modern, sophisticated equipment. And unfortunately, tragically, they have not been able to defend the country. And I think that explains why this has moved as quickly as it's moved.
For more now, let's bring in CBS News foreign correspondent Charlie D'Agata. He joins me now from London. Charlie, first off, thanks for joining us. Now, the takeover of Kabul, it seems to be happening faster than anyone anticipated. What's the latest right now?
Well, I think you covered the key points in the introduction there. We have the Taliban has now entered the presidential palace. President Ashraf Ghani has left the country. We have confirmation of that. Importantly, the U.S. Embassy has shifted from the U.S. Embassy compound, and it is a compound, it's not a building, over to the airport. The reports of some skirmishes, I think, is the best way to report it. What's happening at the airport, there are Turkish forces there who are standing in defense, of course. A number of U.S. military, U.S. Marines, Army soldiers who've been deployed to the U.S. Embassy and to the airport itself to safeguard the withdrawal of Americans there. But for all intents and purposes, the Taliban have essentially taken over Kabul. They haven't declared victory. They haven't declared that they've taken over the city. I think that is something of an important measure because as we've seen in the past, in fact, in the past few days, as they have run roughshod over these cities, including Kandahar, Mazar-Sharif, Herat, huge cities next to Kabul, they have taken those places over and have declared victory. That hasn't happened yet. That doesn't necessarily mean they're treading lightly, but we've had reports that Afghan forces who normally would be manning those checkpoints, and I can tell you from experience, I mean, the entire city is just awash with checkpoints. And from what we hear, those Afghan forces, Afghan security forces, police, have just simply gone home. So the Taliban, for all intents and purposes, are in charge of Kabul, even if they haven't announced that yet.
Now, Charlie, the troops and civilians from the U.S. that are in Afghanistan, how many are we talking about, and what's their status right now?
Well, let me give you the exact breakdown, Michael. This comes from David Martin at the Pentagon. 5,000 troops. Now, here's how it breaks down. 1,000 or so were already there, and they were in charge of protecting the embassy and the airport, and then also to safeguard the withdrawal of Americans and, frankly, themselves to get out in the sort of final chapter. And that all would have been taking place as scheduled on August 31st. 3,000 more troops have been sent in. That includes 2 Marine battalions and 1 U.S. Army battalion. Those have been deployed over the weekend, so they're either in the process of being deployed or they're already there. 1,000 more troops from the 82nd Airborne have been flown in directly from Fort Bragg. Once again, you have two issues there. You're talking about the withdrawal of U.S. citizens. That's important. But then you have force protection. Whenever you send in any number of troops, there have to be a number of troops to protect the troops, as it were. So you have the U.S. Embassy and the airport. Both of those have to be safeguarded in the event of the Taliban taking any chances, or anybody else for that matter.
Now, Charlie, we know this didn't happen over the course of just a week. The fighting in Afghanistan goes back 20 years. It's America's longest war at this point. So was there ever a point when a different outcome was possible?
It's a good question. A different outcome already was possible, and it was already in effect. The footprint of, say, 2,500 U.S., if you add up 3,000, 3,500 coalition, American and coalition forces, had essentially had a sort of status quo. They were advising Afghan forces. They had air protection. They had close air support. That's really important. That's different from airstrikes. Close air support means that you have, if, say, in the past, the Taliban wanted to make a move on Kandahar, Afghan forces would call in for reinforcements from the U.S. military, and then you'd have close air support, helicopters, and, if necessary, airstrikes. And that would stop a Taliban offensive in the past. Once you remove that equation from the battlefield, well, that turned the equation entirely. And after sort of May 1st, which is, if we recall, that was originally President Trump's agreement that all troops would be out by May 1st. That wasn't going to happen. But then President Biden said it won't be May 1st, but it will be September 11th. Well, really, that was the starting pistol for the Taliban. And we've seen the Taliban just increase its urgency. And we've seen these provincial capitals just topple like dominoes because it's all about momentum and about morale. Momentum was going in the way of the Taliban. Morale was not going in the way of Afghan forces. I mean, simply put, they just simply were not capable. They didn't have the belly for the fight without knowing that they were overwatched by the U.S. military. And I've seen that myself. I've seen Afghan operations where they didn't have close air support in terms of helicopter. And this is really important, too, medevac. These soldiers are really worried if they go into a fight and they get shot up that they don't have U.S. military helicopters extracting them. And that's a real psychological thing for Afghan forces. And I think that's what we've seen unfold. Everybody would have predicted what's about to happen or what has happened. Nobody would have predicted that it would have happened this quickly.
And Charlie, I know just last month you were embedded with Afghan troops. What was your perspective after being with them, and what can you tell us about that?
Well, it was kind of like looking into a crystal ball. So we were at Kapiska, which is just maybe an hour outside of Kabul. First of all, we knew how close the Taliban were getting at that point because it wasn't that far. Normally, we used to get into a helicopter to get to the front lines, and usually with U.S. forces. Now it was just a drive away. So that was telling in itself. But that checkpoint that you're looking at right there, that combat outpost, was overrun within a matter of days by the Taliban. And they were complaining that they didn't have U.S. support. Interestingly, we drove right past Bagram Airfield because it's sort of in that same area. And they were saying, you know, you could send a couple of helicopters from 20 minutes away and stop this from happening. But at the time, the Taliban were surrounding these provincial capitals. And the thinking then was that they weren't really going to make a move on those provincial capitals until all U.S. forces had left by August 31st. And as we've seen, especially in the past week, they've just tumbled like dominoes, one after another after another. And an interesting note, I spoke to General Miller, General Scott Miller, who at that time, it was only last month, he was in charge of U.S. and NATO forces there. And I asked him, General, what is your biggest fear? What's your biggest concern going forward over the next few weeks? He said, my biggest concern is if we start seeing these provincial capitals fall one after another, because then you're going to see the momentum from the Taliban and you'll see Afghan forces fold. And unfortunately, tragically, that is exactly what's happened.
I want to talk about the women of Afghanistan. Under the Taliban rule, they had extremely limited rights. They faced beatings. They faced death on a daily basis. Is that in the future? Is that what the women of Afghanistan are going to be facing once again?
You know, I interviewed the Taliban spokesman the last time I was there, and I put that question exactly to him. He said, in these words, he said, young women will be able to go to school, women will be able to hold jobs in keeping with Islamic tradition. Everything has a caveat when you hear the Taliban say how they're going to rule the country, and they intend entirely to rule the country. Now, it was described, this stuck with me. The vice president of Afghanistan at the time, he said, if you look at the Taliban's policies, they're an ocean wide and an inch deep. So they make these broad statements, but when you drill down into them, there's nothing there. Ultimately, they are going to run an Islamist country, and they've made that patently clear. That is what they intend to do. Now, if you want to look at it glass half full, if they want to have international legitimacy, if they want to be respected on the world scale, if they want help from the United States, Western nations, China, etc., then they're going to have to address essentially internationally recognized women's rights. I don't know that I would believe the Taliban. They certainly have gone back on their word, and they've shown no interest in keeping their word. And we hear reports already of the places that are already under Taliban control through methods of intimidation. Girls are already not going to school. Women are absolutely not showing up for work. So the Taliban may say, look, we're going to allow children to go to school, young women to go to school, we're going to allow women to hold jobs, but it would be a very brave person indeed to take that risk, because we've already seen assassinations, we've seen schools that have been targeted, and I'm not sure I'd send my children to school. I'm not sure I'd be happy with my wife holding an important position in Afghanistan.
Charlie D'Agata, thanks for your reporting.
Thank you.
Earlier, I spoke with Afghan interpreter Hewad Hemat in Washington, D.C. He has family in Afghanistan, and I asked him how they're doing.
There are a lot of people who serve with U.S. troops. They are all in danger. They are left behind. There is chaos, and everyone is worried about their safety, about the safety of their families. And I'm also one of them, and we left behind our families. So there is chaos. A lot of people been displaced, and Taliban, the government collapsed. The only resisting Kabul also been overridden by Taliban. Now they are in the presidential palace, so they have control of all over the country.
As we see the Taliban sweeping through the country, what are your biggest concerns right now, and how will that impact your loved ones who are in Afghanistan right now?
Well, there are reports, it's been reported by the human rights organizations, international media, local media, eyewitnesses, that civilian casualties happened and people are being picked up and later on been killed. There are like videos and graphic videos and photos been circulating around the social media. That's people been killed, civilians people been like their hands tied behind and then been killed. Like the human rights organization also reported their concerns. They also said like we have shocking news and we are still looking to those reports, those videos, those proofs, those evidence. So everyone is scared. There is a chaos. I also received calls from many friends since last night. They asking me like what to do, where we go, how to hide, because the rush withdrawal caused the collapse of the Afghan government very fastly. And now no one have any place like to evacuate. However, President Biden sent like order of 5,000 troops to go there to evacuate. But there are reports that a lot of people been stuck there. And the only place is Kabul airport that's under control of the international forces. But just recently, there are reports that firing's been happening around that area as well. So I'm concerned, I'm scared about this evacuation plan might get failed because just right now that I'm speaking to you, there are reports been reported that Taliban started getting into Kabul and they got into the presidential palace. So there is no place left that's not been under control of the Taliban.
Hewad, I know that before coming to America, you worked with U.S. troops in Afghanistan. What was your role there?
Well, I was working there for Radio in a Box project. It was radio programs. We were producing programs to educate the people about peace, about education, about women's rights, about human rights. It was so we were delivering those messages, those programs. We were also hired religious scholars. They were teaching the real Islam. They were teaching about peace. They were telling peoples that Islam is not just war; it means peace. Because the first word of Quran is that God is not just for Muslims; it's God for the whole creation. So, as a Riyadh project operation manager, this was my role, like to manage these projects, and we had around 15 FM radio station around the southeast region of the country, and there was like more than 50 journalists, local journalists were involved to play programs, develop messages, do calling shows, talk with people, and tell them like the development reports as well, and circulate stories, positive stories, and the real facts on the ground to the local population.
Does that past work make your family targets for the Taliban?
Well, in 2015, yes, my family was being attacked. They put hand grenades to our home, but luckily no one was injured. But still, as I said, there were like reports by the human rights organizations that civilians been killed. All those pro-government civilians and pro-U.S. mission civilians been picked up and killed at Kandahar and Ghazni. Last week I was speaking. Last week I spoke with the provincial council member from Kandahar, Haji Fida Muhammad Afghan. He told me that his two sons were picked up by unknown gunmen, but that area was under control of Taliban. And in the middle of night, his two sons were picked up. One was 37, another one was 27, I believe. So the next morning, he received a call to pick up and to recover the dead bodies of his two sons. So there are reports that around 700 or 900 people been picked up in Spin Buldak district of Kandahar, and they have been missing, and hundreds of bodies been recovered. And also in Ghazni, Malistan, some civilians casualties been reported by the provincial council member of Ghazni to local media, to human rights organizations. So there are reports of surrendered security personnel been killed by Taliban, and there are videos, there are photographs, and there are concerns among the people, among those left behind. Believe me, I'm receiving calls that's made me to cry. Everyone is scared. They say like there is chaos. So everything is gone. And it was happened all because of the rush withdrawal of the U.S. government, and it was the Biden decision that it caused to bring this chaos and this dire consequences to Afghan people.
And I want to talk about that. You're part of a group that accuses Pakistan of running a proxy war in Afghanistan, and I know you organized a protest this weekend. What do you want Pakistan to do right now?
Well, it's not been, it's not a secret anymore. It's not been hidden anymore. The international organization, the U.S. government, everyone knows that Taliban was been hosted. They were been like they had safe havens in Pakistan, and they were been receiving a huge support from the Pakistan army and Pakistan military intelligence agencies. And there are like books been written about this. If you can read the 88 Days to Kandahar book, or there is another book, and secret directory. So if you read these books, there are quotes from the international intelligence agencies that how Pakistan's were playing double games with the international community, and how they were supporting, and there were like safe havens for Taliban's in the, Peshawar, in Quetta, in Islamabad, in other places, as we also witnessed, Osama bin Laden was found in the capital, Islamabad. So Pakistan is trying to get strategic depth in Afghanistan, and they had a fear from the strong friendship of Afghanistan in India. But now I think they are almost there. They succeeded. They destroyed the government, which was a very neutral government. Afghan government tried in many occasions to have friendly relationship with them. However, they in several occasions they were assured Pakistan we have good relation with India, but that doesn't mean that India will use its land to attack Pakistan. But Pakistan knew that Afghanistan is a less population country, and also it was a country that's not stand by its own feet. So they reorganized Taliban after 9/11, after 2001 collapse of Taliban regime, and until today. But now they succeeded. Now Taliban have everything in Afghanistan, everything is under their control. In Pakistan, got their strategic depth there because all the Taliban leaders were been hidden there, were been supported there. So now, as an Afghan, I asked Pakistan to stop proxy war, but I think now it's kind of seems late because they got in there and now they will rule the country the way they want, and everyone is scared, so no one knows what will happen.
Hewad Hemat, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.